My name is Lanny Swerdlow. I'm a registered nurse and an advocate for the use of cannabis for its health and medical benefits. I have written a number of articles for magazines and newspapers about that very subject, and that's what we're going to be covering right now. Some very interesting uses of cannabis that will improve your health and make your life better. Over the last 20 years, between 14,000 and 27,000 Americans died every year as a direct result of their use of prescription pharmaceuticals. We don't hear about that very often unless it's a high-profile celebrity that dies from an overdose of prescription pharmaceuticals. One of the most recent, of course, was Michael Jackson. But the high-profile celebrity I want to talk about was Heath Ledger. Ledger's death galvanized the American public, but the underlying cause of his death wasn't talked about very much. In a special issue of Entertainment magazine, they talked about Heath Ledger's life and his death in very graphic terms. Not shying away from the circumstances of his death, the authors of the article wrote that Heath Ledger died from an accidental toxic combination of prescription pharmaceuticals, anti-anxiety medications, and sleeping pills. An accidental toxic combination. Heath Ledger didn't die from an overdose. Heath Ledger took these medications exactly as prescribed by his medical doctors. But they reacted with each other. They interacted with each other to produce some kind of deadly chemistry that wound up killing Heath Ledger. Now, the authors of this story went on to interview a number of people who had very close associations with Heath Ledger during his life. One of them was Terry Gilliam. He was the director of one of his early films, The Brothers Grimm. And in the statements that Terry Gilliam made, one really caught my eye, and that was a statement where he said, marijuana was no longer in his life, which he had enjoyed a bit. Marijuana was no longer in his life, which he had enjoyed a bit. Now, the article didn't talk about why he stopped using marijuana. You could probably figure that out for yourself. You know, a high-profile movie star doesn't want, afraid of getting arrested with marijuana, and then gets the newspapers, so he stopped using marijuana. Even though he liked it, he stopped using it. Now, what were the drugs, what was the reason that Heath Ledger was taking all these prescription pharmaceuticals that killed him? Pain relief, anti-anxiety relief, and to get a good night's sleep. Now, what are the absolute classic uses of cannabis? Pain relief, anti-anxiety, getting a good night's sleep. If Heath Ledger had not stopped using marijuana, if he continued to enjoy it like he did, he would not have needed as many or any of those prescription painkillers, those prescription anti-anxiety medications, or those prescriptions insomnia medications, because he would have been getting all the relief and treatment he needed from cannabis. When he stopped using cannabis and instead turned to these prescription pharmaceuticals, that's what killed him. If he had kept using marijuana, which he had enjoyed a bit, if he had kept on using marijuana, he would not needed anywhere near as many of those prescription pharmaceuticals, and he'd still be alive today making movies and accepting Academy Awards. My name is Lanny Swerdlow. I'm a registered nurse and an advocate for the use of cannabis for its health and medical benefits. I have written a number of articles for magazines and newspapers about that very subject, and that's what we're going to be covering right now. Some very interesting uses of cannabis that will improve your health and make your life better. As a nurse, I constantly get calls at the THCF medical clinic where I work at by prospective medical marijuana patients telling me they are tired of taking prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals, and they want to use something totally natural. Give me a break. These people are not interested in using natural herbal remedies. They're not using chamomile or St. John's wort. They want to use cannabis. For some reason, though, they feel they need to dress it up in some kind of naturalistic, holistic mumbo-jumbo rather than call it what it is. It's cannabis. With time, we begin to recognize the incredible and unique properties of this plant that is so beneficial for all humanity. Sure, cannabis is a natural herb, but claiming you want to use cannabis because it's a natural herb is like saying you want to drive a Maserati because it's a car. Passing cannabis off as some natural herb is absurd and demeaning. It is way more than just a natural herb. Most of these stories about the curative powers of these natural herbs are just old wives' tales, and the few that really do have benefits pale in comparison to the benefits of cannabis. We use cannabis not because it's a natural herbal remedy, but because it is cannabis. Herbal remedies are maligned by most doctors because Western medicine uses evidentiary-based, peer-reviewed scientific studies to justify their claim. And there is very, very few studies out there that actually show any benefit to most of these herbal remedies. Cannabis, on the other hand, over the last 20 years or so, there has been a cascade of studies showing the effective and safe use of cannabis to treat a variety of ailments. In 1937, the American Medical Association was the only organization to testify before Congress opposing the Marijuana Tax Act, which essentially made cannabis illegal in the United States. Less than a decade later, the AMA joined the legion of reefer madness folk out there who decided that cannabis had absolutely no use. Well, guess what? The AMA has now, after 50 years of opposition to cannabis, changed its stance. And in 2010, passed a resolution asking the government to start studies to reschedule marijuana from a Schedule I substance to Schedule II or Schedule III. They now recognize, and they stated, that cannabis has a definite and important medical uses. A study released in August 2009 showed that cannabis was very effective in preventing the development of head and neck squamous cell cancer. Yet the authors of the study had to put in all kinds of weasel words saying, oh my gosh, we have to be careful because it's so dangerous in so many other ways. And yet there is not a single, not one, scientific study out there that shows any kind of significant negative effect from the use of cannabis. But these weasel words, oh, we've got to be careful, are still included in peer-reviewed evidentiary-based studies based on absolutely no evidence. This degradation of cannabis is ubiquitous and beyond belief. We've got to stop caving in to the pressures of law enforcement and drug warriors and all these people and begin to talk about cannabis in the beneficial ways that it is. We need to loudly proclaim the words of Francis Young, DEA Law Administration Judge, when he wrote, "Cannabis is the safest and most effective therapeutic agent known to man."